Moving to California in 2026, it's going to be either the greatest financial decision you've ever made in your entire life, or it's going to be the biggest mistake you've made financially ever. So, today, I'm going to tell you about the real pros and cons of moving to California and what it's really like here. I'm Saul Carter. Thank you so much for being here. And I want the decisions you make in real estate not to be based on that emotion, but to be based on real facts. So let's get into it. I've got pros, I've got cons, and let's jump right into those pros to begin with. So, what is the number one thing about California? Man, it is not one state. It is literally 12 different places to live in, and you can be in the foothills, you can be in the mountains, you can be in the beach, you can be in the Inland Empire. All of these places are like living in a different state at any particular time. Now, you can move to any one of them, and they all have their different characteristics and whatnot. Whatever you want, you can find in California, but keep in mind that each individual space comes with a little bit of a different cost, a little bit of a different lifestyle. So, but the upside is you get to choose, right? So, number two on that list is our economy. It's literally 4 or 5 in the entire world. Last year in 2025, the GDP was $4.25 trillion. And in January of 2026 alone, California added 93,000 jobs. And there's not a lot of states that actually can say that, right? So what does that do? Well, that keeps the values of property really high, despite whatever you hear in the news about horrible mismanagement and all these other things, and the people not get represented. Man, there is still a lot of opportunity, and there's still a lot of jobs in California. And what does that mean? That means that people have the ability to buy their home and live there, and there's just tons and tons of opportunity. Number 3 is the weather. Man, the weather is amazing. Now, there are parts of California that can get super hot, like Death Valley, which is like the lowest place in the United States or world or something like that. And it can get really hot there. The same with the Central Valley. There are times in the Central Valley where you'll have 2 weeks, 3 weeks on end that it is 110 degrees. Way over triple digits, and it's not friendly. But there are parts of California that are like living in paradise. Ventura, the coastline in Santa Barbara, the middle of the coast, like you got San Luis Obispo, Big Sur area, all these different things, all the way up into San Francisco. Great, great weather no matter where you go. But you can find different climate zones all over the place. California, if you've never been there, is a lot bigger than you think. All right. Education. The UC system draws huge crowds. If you're in a city that is getting a UC put into it or whatnot, or a state school, you are going to grow exponentially. That means that real estate is going to stay high, and there's going to be building. I know that in the Central Valley of California, there's UC Merced that has basically stabilized Merced, which is, kind of a podunk town, but then they put a UC there, and it is starting to grow. And it takes some time, but you see growth consistently coming out of that Merced area now. And the same thing, there are UCs and state schools all up and down the California coastline, and they all are bringing big crowds. It's like their own little city everywhere they go. So you're going to count on housing and traffic and all those other things that go with that. But it brings in people. And one of the things that you don't get in California as much as a lot of states is that brain drain. So there's so much education here that people come, they stay because they see that opportunity once they are here. Oddly enough, Stanford University just beat out Yale Law School as the best law school in the United States, right? And so that's right here in California, and you can't get that everywhere, right? So the homes build wealth. And so that is number 4 or 5 on the list here. And so what do I mean by that? Well, that median price in California is about $905,000. What does that mean? Well, that means that it has been high and it stays high because there are the jobs, the opportunity, the people here, the the population, the school systems, all that other stuff. So it holds that value for a long term. It is expensive to buy into California if you've not been here before. If you're coming from Wyoming and you're coming to California, it's going to be expensive for you. But once you are here and you start to build, you buy that home and you hold it for 5 years, you are going to have equity. Obviously, there are ups and downs, but man, in California, especially like in the Central Valley, there was a big drop in 2008. That was a once in a lifetime anomaly. And yeah, it hurt a lot of people. But in Southern California, it was not as bad. There are places that just really didn't even feel that because they just kept their equity because there was the people working and the jobs and all that other stuff. But in the Central Valley, it was way worse. There were places that I was selling that were selling originally for $450,000, $500,000 that I was selling for $99,000 during 2008. So that is a once in a lifetime crash. Could it theoretically happen again? Yes. Will it? No, not in our lifetime. I wish it would because I could become a gajillionaire again. But whatever. So, and I had a tech client that was in the valley, and he actually bought a house, held onto it for just 3 years, and he nearly doubled the equity that he had in that property. He originally had it with 20% down and all that stuff, but he gained so much equity in that he was able to move up into a bigger house so much quicker because he had growth in the equity because of the property. So property values hold and add value. I also have another buddy who literally he will buy a house and it's really his retirement program. Tax-wise, you can go buy a house, and as long as you live in that house for at least 2 years, you can basically sell it and keep all of that money, $250,000 of equity, tax-free, right? And so then you can either roll that in to your next house, or you can take that money out and put it into some sort of mutual fund or something like that that is actually making you money. And you can't do that with everything, but he literally buys a fixer, lives in it, fixes it up for 2 years, builds all kinds of massive equity. He is married, so he literally can take $500,000 of tax-free money every 2 years. You can't do that in every state, but you can in California. All right, now I've gone through all the pros, and now I'm gonna get super dark because those cons, they hit pretty hard. So let's go into it. Housing prices are a stretch. I just talked about that, how they hold value and it's super hard to get in. And once you get in, it's a stretch. So if you are on a fixed income, or it's, you're gonna have a big mortgage, insurance, all those other things. And honestly, all the other things are expensive too. So you can live in that house, have equity, build equity, but you're gonna live relatively poor depending on your situation. And the same thing holds true with rents. Rents continually go up. So if you're not renting you might get into California, rent for 6 months or a year so you can get a lay of the land. But in that whole time, you are not taking advantage of equity. You're paying for somebody else to get equity if you're renting. And rents basically they've gone down 1% a little bit over the last year. That's not that much. And that's one of the first times since 2008 that has actually happened. I don't expect it to hold. I expect that rents will, in this coming year, start to go back up again. But you got to keep that in mind. All right, let's talk about number 2. And this is the one that I hope everybody knows. But if you move to California, you are going to pay a lot in taxes. You're going to pay sales tax. You're going to pay for your regular state income tax. And it is basically 13.3%, I believe. And depending on which county or city you're in, your state sales tax is going to be, in that 7 to 8 or 9 range. And so that gets expensive. It's what helps you feel like you're living poor, even though you might be living on the beach in a $1.2 million house. So now there are other sneaky little things too. There are excise taxes and Melrose and other different taxes, depending on where you buy, that pay for things that are not even talked about, that are above and beyond the income tax and sales tax. So just know that California is going to get theirs, and that adds up fast if you're not ready for it. All right, insurance is a deal killer. I talk about this all the time in my different videos. There are literally about 9% of the properties that get into escrow that fall out just because the insurance premiums threw them out of their loan to value ratios and they weren't able to buy the property, or they just said, no way. I recently had one client that had a beautiful home on a hilltop in Southern California, and they were like, this is going to be great. But they were stretching. They were like, this is going to be a stretch. It's going to be awesome, but we're going to love this house. And then they got their insurance premiums of $8,000 a year, and they weren't able to do that. And they shopped that thing left and right, and it just did not happen for them. What ended up happening, they ended up going past all of their sign off and all that other stuff because they did not take care of that insurance right up front like I asked them to, and they end up losing their deposit. Does it make me happy that happened? No, but it's a reality because it would have been them a lot harder if they would have just went ahead and stayed and eaten the $8,000. Well, basically what it came down to is their loan values and debt to ratios just didn't work out because of that. All right, now daily expenses. I'm talking about cost of gas, food, all those different things are going to really hit you hard. On average, it's about 5.4% higher than the rest of the nation. And that's not just on gas. That is basically everything. But gas especially is going to be one of those things that hits you pretty hard and you're unexpected. California is its own island as far as gas is concerned. We not only are not connected to the rest of the United States on oil production, but we are also have all of our own formulas for gas, and they change over the course of the year to maximize efficiency and all that stuff. And what does that mean? That means that our gas is super special and costs a lot more. And so, it hits the pocket pretty good when you have a car that gets, 18 gallons and you fill it up in Nevada for $50, and then you drive across the border and it costs you $100 to fill up that same gas tank. You notice. All right. And I've talked about a bunch of different things about how the different regions you can live into. Some of the things you'll run into if you don't account for them appropriately based on where you want to work is your commute and all the other things that come with that. If you are driving an hour and a half a day one way to get to your job, that is going to have a lot of wear and tear and expense, not just on your mental fatigue, but your family and your car and all these other things. So keep that in mind when you're moving here. And it is one of those things because the upside of California, it has tons and tons of jobs. But those jobs are typically in a little bit more expensive areas. So if you can't afford to get into that area to begin with, it's going to be a lot harder. You're going to have to count on commuting. And if you're from a lot smaller state, you're just not used to that on the level that Californians are. And a lot of people complain about Southern California traffic. I got to tell you, Northern California traffic drives me way crazier. The Bay Area is wild. Anyway, and last but not least, you get crowds wherever you go, right? If you're up there skiing, or you're at the beach trying to surf, or you're just going to the beach, to the pier to grab some fish and chips, there's going to be a crowd everywhere you go in all these populated places. Now, there are places like Yosemite Yosemite specifically is going to be crowded, but there are tons of places in the Sierra that you can go to that are not going to be fully crowded, but they take a while to get to depending on where you live in the state. And so that's a big con, meaning that it's a big state. So if you looked at the list of all the wonderful things you want to see in this state, the list looks super short, but all those places could be 5 or 8 hours away from each other. So if you want to drive from San Francisco to San Diego, it's going to take you 8 hours to do that. And so you can't it's not like you're moving to a state where you can get to everywhere super fast. That's what I talked about at the beginning of the video, where it's like living in several different states. And so what are the bottom line? If you're on a fixed income, you better have a strategy on how you're going to make things put together here in California. If you have cash, you're great off. You can buy a house and just have that cash. It really helps. The upside along those lines is California is a place where if you are a hustler or you've got the job lined up, it is a place to make a lot of money. There is, despite whatever kind of management of the state there is tons and tons of opportunity in California. And if you are ready to take advantage of that, you really can. And so that's the type of person that can come here and really make things work. But if you're retiring, even though Simi Valley, which is right next to me, is one of the biggest retirement cities in the United States, it is a harder place to be than, let's say Mobile, Alabama, or somewhere in Florida, just because of cost. Now, it is a better climate, especially if you don't like the humidity, but there are trade-offs where that's concerned. So those are my biggest pieces on pros and cons for California. If I missed any, please write them down right below or tell me where I'm just crazy. And I will talk to you soon. If you're looking for any more tips and tricks, or maybe even moving to California, give me a ring, get on my schedule, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.